The sun was setting behind the old row of houses in a quiet neighborhood. The streets were filled with the voices of children playing, yet one house stood strangely different from the rest. Inside, a little girl named Emily was struggling to keep her balance. She was only 8 years old, but her small hands were already red from scrubbing the floor. The bucket of water beside her was heavy, and every time she dipped the cloth in, her arms trembled as if they could not carry the weight anymore. Her steps were slow, her eyes tired, and her stomach empty, but the voice that shouted at her from the next room allowed no rest. "Faster, Emily! Don't you dare stop," her stepmother's voice echoed across the walls. Emily tried to obey, but her knees shook. She had already been at it for hours. Every corner of the house had to shine, or she knew her stepmother would find a reason to scold her again. Emily bit her lip, trying not to cry. She had learned long ago that tears only made things worse. Still, she could not hide the pain in her chest. She was just a child, and the world around her felt too heavy. She wished her father were home, but he worked far away, traveling for weeks at a time. He believed his daughter was safe, cared for by the woman he had married, yet he did not know the truth. He did not see how lonely and frightened Emily was when the doors closed at night. Her little hand slipped, and the bucket tipped slightly, spilling water across the floor. Emily gasped, quickly grabbing the cloth to wipe it up. Her stepmother appeared in the doorway, frowning. "Clumsy girl! Can't you even do this right?" she shouted. Emily nodded quickly, forcing her tears back, and whispered, "I'm sorry." But her apology was ignored as her stepmother walked away with a huff. Emily worked harder, her small body aching. The house was large, with many rooms, and she was often made to do the chores alone. Her step-siblings, older and stronger, never lifted a hand to help. They teased her, laughed when she struggled, and left their mess behind for her to clean. Sometimes, they stole her food, leaving her with nothing but a piece of bread or a cold potato at the end of the day. That evening, as the sky outside grew darker, Emily felt her strength leaving her. She leaned against the wall, pressing her tiny hands over her face. The sound of laughter came from the living room where her stepmother and her children sat comfortably, eating a warm dinner. The smell of food reached her, making her stomach twist painfully. She whispered to herself, trying to be brave, but her voice trembled, "I can't stand any more." Her whisper soon grew louder, breaking into a sob. "I can't stand any more," she cried out, her voice echoing through the house. She dropped the cloth and sank to the floor. For a moment, silence fell, and her own words frightened her. It was rare for Emily to let her feelings out, but that night, she could no longer hold them inside. She felt as if her body would break apart if she kept suffering in silence. The neighbors outside heard her scream. Some paused, exchanging worried looks. They had often seen Emily walking alone, her head down, carrying heavy bags or sweeping the porch when other children were playing. They whispered among themselves, wondering what really went on in that house. But none of them came forward. They told themselves it was not their place to interfere. The walls of that home kept many secrets, and everyone was too afraid or too indifferent to uncover them. Inside, Emily's cries were met with more scolding. Her stepmother stormed into the hall, glaring at her. "Stop that noise. Do you want the whole neighborhood to think we are cruel?" she hissed. Emily tried to wipe her tears quickly, shaking her head. "Please, I'm tired," she whispered. But the woman grabbed her arm, pulling her up sharply. "You will finish your work, and you will not make a scene again. Do you hear me?" she said firmly. Emily nodded, though her legs trembled so much she could barely stand. When her stepmother left, Emily returned to her chores silently. Yet in her heart, the cry still echoed. She had reached a point where her small body and spirit could no longer carry the weight. She thought of her father, the one person she wished to see. She imagined him walking through the door, smiling and hugging her the way he used to. In her mind, she pictured herself telling him everything. But reality was harsher. He was miles away, and she was alone with people who treated her as if she did not belong. Despite the sadness, Emily held on to one secret joy. In the small space under her bed, she kept a box filled with papers and pencils. Whenever she found a quiet moment, she drew pictures. Some were of the flowers she saw on her way to school, others were of the skies she admired through the window, and many were of people she wished were in her life: a kind mother, a gentle friend, and sometimes even a hero who would come and rescue her. Her drawings were her world, the only place where she felt free. That night, after finishing the chores, Emily crawled into bed without food. The house was silent, except for the muffled laughter of her stepfamily in the next room. She curled up under the thin blanket, hugging her box of drawings. Her stomach hurt, her eyes burned, but she whispered again into the darkness, "I can't stand any more." The words slipped out like a prayer, as if someone somewhere might hear her and finally come to her side. She closed her eyes tightly, imagining a different tomorrow. She dreamed of someone who would step into her world, someone strong enough to see her pain and end it. She did not know that fate was already moving in her favor. She did not know that beyond those walls, in the distance, a man who owned more than she could ever imagine was on his way back home. That man's return would change her life forever. But for now, Emily only had her tears, her small voice, and the hope that one day, her cries would not go unanswered. The morning light slipped through the curtains, and Emily woke with a heavy heart. Her body ached from the chores of the previous night, and her stomach still felt empty. She rose quietly, careful not to make a sound that might disturb her stepmother or her step-siblings. The house was still, and in that stillness, she found a moment to breathe. She opened her small wooden box under the bed and took out her favorite paper and pencil. Her tiny hands trembled as she drew the picture of a bird flying high in the sky. She stared at it for a long time, whispering to herself, "One day, I will be free like you." Then she tucked it back before anyone could see. Her stepmother entered the room soon after. She carried a tray with tea for herself but no food for Emily. "Up already? Good. You have more to do today. The windows are dirty, and the yard is a mess," she said sharply. Emily nodded and rushed to wash her face. She had learned not to argue, not to complain, only to obey. But deep inside, a quiet sadness lingered. The neighbors noticed Emily again that morning as she swept the yard. One woman whispered to another, "That poor girl works like a servant." The other woman sighed but shook her head. "We should not get involved. Families have their own ways." And with that, they turned away, pretending they had not seen her tired little hands struggling with a broom twice her size. Emily's father remained absent, away on long work trips. He trusted the woman he married and believed his daughter was cared for. When he called, his wife answered cheerfully, speaking about school and chores as if everything were normal. Emily rarely got the chance to speak to him, and when she did, her stepmother hovered close by, warning her with a cold look not to reveal the truth. Emily wanted to shout out, to tell him everything, but fear closed her lips. She only said she missed him, and he promised he would come home soon. Inside the house, life moved forward for her step-family. They ate meals together, laughed at the table, and made plans for outings. Emily watched from the corner, sometimes carrying dishes, sometimes sweeping crumbs from under the chairs. She felt invisible, as if she were a shadow moving between them. But in her heart, she longed for a day when someone would notice her pain. One evening, as the family prepared for a dinner party, Emily was given the hardest tasks. She polished silver, washed plates, and ran back and forth under constant orders. Her step-siblings dressed in fine clothes, mocking her for her worn dress and messy hair. Emily's stepmother reminded her again and again, "Stay in the kitchen. Do not embarrass us in front of our guests." Emily lowered her head, hiding her tears, and obeyed. During the party, laughter and music filled the rooms. Emily stayed in the back, washing dishes in silence. But her cries from the previous night had not been forgotten. Some guests whispered among themselves. They had heard the child's desperate words, and though they said nothing openly, their eyes followed her with pity. Yet no one stood up to ask questions. No one dared to challenge her stepmother's sharp tongue. The house was full of voices, but Emily's remained unheard. Late that night, after everyone left, Emily sat by the window, hugging her knees. The stars outside sparkled, and she whispered to them as if they were her secret friends. "Do you see me? Do you know how much I wish to be safe?" Her eyes filled with tears. She thought of her father again, wondering when he would return. Would he notice the pain written in her eyes? Would he believe her if she told him the truth? She prayed silently that the answer would be yes. Meanwhile, somewhere far from that house, a man named Mr. Harrison was making plans to come back. He was a millionaire, respected by many, yet he lived a quiet life away from attention. He had been traveling for months, managing businesses in other cities. But now, his heart pulled him back home. He missed the place he had built with his own hands, a grand home filled with memories. It was the same house where Emily now lived. Few people knew the truth that her stepmother was only staying there because of a temporary arrangement. Mr. Harrison was known in the town as a man of wealth, but those who truly knew him spoke of his strong sense of justice. He had once lost someone dear to him, a daughter of his own who had died young. That pain had never left him, and though he hid it well, it shaped the way he looked at the world. Children's cries, even from a distance, could stir his heart. On the night when Emily shouted that she could not stand any more, the sound had reached more than just the neighbors. One of Mr. Harrison's trusted workers, who had been checking on the property nearby, heard the cry and mentioned it to him in passing. The words unsettled him deeply. He wondered what kind of pain could force such desperate words from a child. His journey back suddenly felt urgent. He decided to cut his business short and return sooner than planned. Emily, unaware of this, continued her days as before. Each morning brought new chores, each night brought silent tears. Yet through it all, she held on to small pieces of hope. She carried her drawings like treasures, believing they were her doorway to another world. Whenever she sketched, she forgot the cold stares, the harsh words, and the hunger. She imagined herself in the pictures flying with birds, sitting under trees, or holding the hand of someone who loved her. The community around her grew uneasy. They knew something was wrong, but they lacked the courage to act. Some feared the stepmother's sharp temper. Others convinced themselves it was not their responsibility. And so Emily's cries were left unanswered, floating in the air like forgotten prayers. But fate has a way of turning quietly, preparing a moment when everything changes. Emily's whispered words, her silent drawings, and her hidden tears were leading to something bigger. She could not see it yet, but the storm inside her home was about to meet a force she never imagined. The return of Mr. Harrison would break open the walls that had trapped her for so long. For now, Emily pressed her forehead against the cold window pane, watching the stars fade into the coming dawn. Her heart was heavy, but somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope remained. She believed that life could not always be this way. She believed that someone, someday, would hear her and rescue her from the shadows. And just beyond the horizon, that hope was beginning to take shape. A car would soon roll down the street, carrying the man whose voice had power, whose presence carried weight, and whose heart would not allow a child's cry to go unheard. Emily's world was dark, but the light was already on its way. The day was heavy with clouds, and the wind rattled the windows of the old house. Emily's body felt weaker than usual. She had been given more chores than she could handle, and her stepmother's sharp voice followed her everywhere she turned. She carried buckets of water, swept the floor, and polished the furniture until her tiny arms shook. Her step-siblings lounged in the living room, laughing and throwing crumbs on the carpet she had just cleaned. Emily bent down silently to gather them, knowing that if she refused, the punishment would only grow harsher. As the hours passed, hunger gnawed at her stomach. She had eaten nothing since morning, only a crust of bread she had hidden away. Her vision blurred as she tried to finish wiping the windows. Her arms trembled, and the rag slipped from her hands. She leaned against the wall, whispering to herself, "I can't stand any more." Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, her eyes filling with tears. The sound of her cry echoed once more, sharper than before, carried by the stormy wind through the thin walls of the house. Outside, some neighbors paused again, exchanging uneasy glances. But as always, they said nothing, convincing themselves it was not their place to interfere. They turned away, leaving the girl's voice unanswered. Inside, the stepmother rushed in, anger flashing across her face. "What is this nonsense again? Get up and finish your work," she snapped, pulling Emily by the arm. Emily struggled to her feet, though her body trembled. "Please," she whispered, "I am too tired." But her words fell like stones into silence. Her stepmother only tightened her grip, glaring at her with impatience. At that very moment, far down the street, the sound of an engine broke through the storm. A sleek black car turned the corner, its headlights cutting across the rain. The vehicle rolled to a stop in front of the house, and the door opened slowly. Out stepped Mr. Harrison, the millionaire who had been away for months. His coat was damp from the rain, but his tall frame carried a commanding presence. He stood still for a moment, staring at the house with narrowed eyes. It was the home he had built, the place that carried his memories, yet something about its silence felt wrong. He took a step forward, then paused as a faint cry reached his ears. The words were muffled but unmistakable, "I can't stand any more." The sound pierced him like a knife. His heart tightened, and his jaw clenched. He remembered his own daughter, years ago, her voice calling for him in moments of fear. That memory fueled his steps as he marched toward the door. Inside, Emily's stepmother was still scolding her when the door burst open with a loud crash. Everyone froze. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes blazing with anger. "What is going on here?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the halls. The sound was so powerful that the entire room fell silent. Emily's eyes widened as she looked at the stranger. She had never seen him before, but something in his presence felt like strength, like safety. Her stepmother's face went pale. She stammered, trying to compose herself. "Mr. Harrison, we did not expect you back so soon," she said, forcing a smile. But her hands trembled as she tried to hide her unease. Mr. Harrison stepped further inside, his gaze sweeping across the room. He saw Emily standing in the corner, her small frame shaking, her eyes filled with tears. He noticed the rag on the floor, the bucket of dirty water, and the exhaustion written on the child's face. His heart ached, but his anger grew sharper. He turned back to the stepmother. "Why is this child working like a servant? Why is she crying like this?" he demanded. The stepmother tried to laugh it off. "Oh, children exaggerate, sir. She is dramatic at times. She was only helping around the house. Nothing more." But Emily, finding a rare moment of courage, whispered softly, "I can't stand any more." Her words carried across the room, fragile yet filled with truth. Mr. Harrison's head turned sharply toward her. He saw the honesty in her eyes, the weight of her suffering. His voice thundered again, "Enough lies." The stepchildren cowered behind their mother, unsure of what to do. The stepmother attempted another excuse. "She is my husband's daughter. I only ask her to help. We treat her well." But Mr. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Treat her well? Look at her. Do you think I am blind? This house tells me the truth. Emily's stepmother's lips quivered, but she stayed silent. Mr. Harrison's fury was too strong to challenge. He moved toward Emily and bent slightly to her level. His voice softened, though his eyes were still sharp. Tell me, child. What has been happening here? Emily hesitated. She glanced at her stepmother, whose eyes flashed a warning. Fear made her step back. But Mr. Harrison noticed it. He stood tall again and shouted, "No more threats. Speak freely, Emily. You are safe now." Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks as she finally let her words out. She spoke of endless chores, of hunger, of nights spent crying alone. She told him about the laughter at the table while she was left with nothing but scraps. Her voice shook, but each word painted a clearer picture of her suffering. Mr. Harrison's fists clenched at his sides. Every word was like fire in his chest. He turned to the stepmother, his voice like thunder. "How dare you? This house was entrusted to you, and this is how you treat the child you were meant to protect." The stepmother tried to protest, but her voice cracked. "You don't understand," she began. "I understand enough." Mr. Harrison cut her off. "I heard her cry with my own ears before I stepped inside. I see the truth with my own eyes now. You have no excuse." The room was silent except for the sound of the storm outside. Emily clutched her hands together, trembling, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Someone had finally heard her cry. Someone had shouted on her behalf. Mr. Harrison pointed toward the door. "Get out of my sight. You and your children. This house is no longer yours to misuse." The stepmother gasped, but she knew better than to argue further. Mr. Harrison's wealth and power left no room for defiance. She gathered her children quickly, muttering under her breath, and hurried out of the room. The door slammed behind them, leaving Emily and Mr. Harrison alone. For a long moment, the millionaire looked at the little girl, his heart heavy with sorrow. She was shaking, thin, and pale, yet her eyes still held a quiet strength. He remembered his own daughter's eyes, and a deep vow formed in his heart. He would not let this child suffer another day. "From now on," he said gently, "you are safe. No one will hurt you again." Emily stared at him, hardly believing his words. But as the storm raged outside, a warmth began to spread in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lifting, as if her small voice had finally been heard by the right person. The storm outside raged on, lightning flashing across the dark sky, but inside the house, a different kind of storm had already broken loose. Emily stood frozen in the corner, her hands clasped tightly together. She had just witnessed something she thought impossible. For the first time, someone had raised their voice in her defense. The man who had entered the house, Mr. Harrison, looked like a figure of authority and strength, and his words had forced her stepmother to flee with her children. Emily could hardly believe what had just happened. Mr. Harrison walked slowly across the room, his footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. His face was still stern, but his eyes softened as he looked at Emily. He bent down to her level again, this time speaking in a calmer tone. "You don't need to be afraid anymore. Tell me everything, child. I want the truth." Emily hesitated, glancing at the door as if her stepmother might suddenly return and punish her for speaking. Her lips trembled. She made me do everything. I cleaned, I cooked, I never got to eat with them. Sometimes, I was so hungry. I thought I would faint." Her voice cracked, and tears filled her eyes. She wiped them quickly, afraid of seeming weak. Mr. Harrison reached into his pocket and offered her a handkerchief. "Do not hide your tears. They tell the truth better than words sometimes." Emily took it slowly, holding it close but not daring to wipe her face yet. He listened as she explained the endless chores, the nights she went to bed without food, and the harsh words that followed her everywhere. She told him about the neighbors who looked but never stepped in, about her father's absence, and about how she longed for someone to notice her. Her words poured out like water breaking through a dam, and with each word, Mr. Harrison's anger burned brighter. When she finally fell silent, exhausted from speaking, Mr. Harrison stood up tall, his voice ringing with authority. "This house was mine," he declared. "I entrusted it to her, believing she would care for it with dignity. But more than the house, I see now that I entrusted her with something far greater: a child's life, a child's happiness. She has betrayed both." Emily looked at him with wide eyes. She had not known until this moment that he was the true owner of the house. Her stepmother had always spoken of it as though it belonged to her, as though she had earned the right to live in its walls. To learn now that it had all been a lie shocked Emily, but at the same time, it gave her a strange sense of comfort. Perhaps the house itself had never belonged to those who mistreated her. Perhaps it had always been waiting for someone else to return. The truth sank into her slowly. Mr. Harrison had power over the house, over the people who had caused her suffering. He had the authority to make them leave, and he had already done it. Emily's heart fluttered with the faintest sense of relief. But Mr. Harrison was not finished. He called for his driver, who had been waiting outside in the car. A tall man in a dark coat entered, standing respectfully by the door. Mr. Harrison spoke firmly. "See that those people do not come back. Their time in this home is over." The driver nodded and stepped outside again to ensure the order was carried out. Emily watched silently, her heart beating fast. She could hardly believe she was witnessing her stepmother's control being stripped away in a single night. Mr. Harrison turned back to her. "Emily," he said gently, "you are not alone anymore. But I need to know everything, even the small things. Show me what you keep hidden, the things that matter to you." Emily hesitated again, but something in his voice made her trust him. Slowly, she walked to her room and reached under her bed. She pulled out the little wooden box she had kept hidden for so long. Inside were folded papers, old pencils worn to half their size, and a small collection of drawings she had made in secret. She opened the box carefully, her fingers brushing over the top paper. She handed one of the drawings to him. It was of a bird flying above the trees, wings stretched wide. "I drew this when I wanted to feel free," she whispered. Mr. Harrison looked at the picture for a long time. His eyes glistened, though he blinked quickly to hide it. "You draw beautifully," he said softly. He looked at another, a picture of a girl holding hands with someone taller, smiling under a bright sky. "Who is this?" he asked. Emily lowered her eyes. "It's me, and someone I wish was here. Someone kind. I always pretended there was someone to hold my hand when I was scared." Her words trembled, but her honesty shone through. Mr. Harrison's chest tightened. The drawings reminded him painfully of his own daughter, the one he had lost. She too had loved to draw, leaving little sketches around the house. Looking at Emily's pictures felt like a voice from the past calling to him. In that moment, he made a silent promise to himself. This child would not suffer another day of neglect. He placed the drawings carefully back in the box and handed it to her. "These are treasures," he said. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise. They show who you are inside, and that is stronger than anything they tried to take from you." Emily's eyes filled again, but this time the tears were different. They carried a mixture of sadness and hope. She clutched the box close to her chest. Mr. Harrison straightened up and walked to the large dining table. He placed his hand on it and spoke with a voice that echoed through the house. "This home will no longer be a place of cruelty. From tonight, it will be a place of safety, a place of kindness. Emily, you will eat at this table. You will not be hidden in corners. You will go to school with the freedom to learn, and you will sleep without fear." Emily blinked, not sure if she had heard him correctly. At the table, she asked softly, as if the idea were too grand to be real. "Yes," he replied firmly. "At the table. Where you belong." The warmth in his tone spread through the room. For Emily, it was as though years of silence and shadows were slowly lifting away. She was still trembling, but now it was with disbelief that such kindness could exist for her. Mr. Harrison walked toward the window, staring out at the storm. His reflection stared back at him, older and wearier than before, but now with a new purpose. He had returned to his house expecting only to manage property and affairs. Instead, he had found a child whose voice had nearly been silenced. And he knew, with every part of his being, that this was no accident. As the thunder rolled in the distance, he turned back to her once more. "Emily," he said, his voice steady, "from this moment, your life changes. No one will ever silence your cries again." Emily's small body shook as she hugged the box of drawings tighter. For the first time, she believed the promise. For the first time, she felt that maybe her prayers had been heard. The storm outside slowly began to ease, and though the night was still dark, a new light had entered her world. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently into the house, casting a warm glow across the polished wooden floors. For the first time, Emily woke up without fear clutching at her chest. She sat up slowly, her eyes scanning the room that had always felt like a cage. Now, it seemed transformed, less threatening, almost welcoming. The curtains swayed with the morning breeze, and birds chirped outside as though celebrating her freedom. She padded quietly to the door, her small feet making soft sounds on the floor. Peeking into the main hallway, she saw Mr. Harrison already awake, standing by the window with a cup of tea in his hand. His presence was calm and reassuring, and for the first time, Emily felt truly safe. He turned when he saw her and offered a small smile. "Good morning, Emily," he said warmly. "Sleep well?" Emily nodded, though her throat felt tight with emotion. I I think I did," she replied softly. She had not realized how long it had been since she had slept without nightmares. "Come," he said, beckoning her to follow. "It's time for breakfast. You won't be hiding this time." Emily's stomach rumbled nervously. She had gone so long without proper meals that the thought of sitting at the dining table filled her with a strange mix of excitement and fear. But the sight of Mr. Harrison's calm, encouraging face gave her courage. She took a deep breath and stepped into the dining room. The table was set beautifully, with plates of fresh fruit, bread, eggs, and a steaming pot of tea. Emily's eyes widened. She had never seen so much food laid out for her, and yet, the kind smile on Mr. Harrison's face made her heart swell with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Please," he said, gesturing toward the chair at the head of the table opposite him. "Sit anywhere you like. Eat as much as you want. No one will tell you otherwise." Emily sat down slowly, her fingers brushing against the cool surface of the table. She reached for the bread first, then hesitated. Mr. Harrison's eyes met hers, filled with understanding. "Take your time," he said gently. "No rush. You deserve to enjoy every bite." As she ate, she felt a warmth spreading inside her that had nothing to do with the food. It was the warmth of being seen, of being valued, of being treated with kindness for the first time in her young life. Mr. Harrison watched her quietly, letting her find her own rhythm, and yet, his presence was steady and protective. When breakfast was finished, Mr. Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Emily, today marks a new beginning. I want to help you reclaim your life. There are schools nearby that welcome students who need support. You will attend classes, learn, and make friends. You will also have time for your drawings, for your hobbies, and for anything else that brings you joy. Nothing you do will ever be dismissed or belittled again." Emily's heart raced with excitement and disbelief. She had never imagined a life like this one where she could be a child, where she could be happy, where she could dream without fear. She nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Harrison kept his promises. He arranged for Emily to enroll in school immediately. He personally spoke to the teachers, explaining her situation without exposing her past humiliation. Emily was nervous on her first day, but the teachers were kind, and the other children accepted her with curiosity and warmth. She realized quickly that she could learn, laugh, and play just like any other child. At home, the house underwent a quiet transformation as well. Rooms that had felt dark and threatening now felt bright and welcoming. Emily's small belongings, once hidden and disregarded, were given spaces of their own. Her drawings were framed and placed on walls, celebrating her talent rather than hiding it. Emily also began to notice small acts of care from Mr. Harrison. He would leave little notes of encouragement on her desk before school, reminding her to be confident, to trust herself, and to always speak her mind. Sometimes, he would sneak in and bring her favorite snacks, or sit quietly beside her as she drew. His presence was constant but gentle, never overpowering, always reassuring. One afternoon, as Emily worked on a new drawing of a sun rising over a vast field, Mr. Harrison sat beside her. "That's beautiful, Emily," he said. "You have a gift, and I want to help you nurture it. One day, your work will inspire others, and it all starts here, in this room, with you believing in yourself." Emily looked up at him, eyes wide. "Do you really think so?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know so," he replied firmly. "Talent like yours does not go unnoticed. But more importantly, your heart, your courage, and your kindness will guide you further than any drawing ever could. You are stronger than you realize." Emily felt a surge of pride and happiness. For the first time in her life, someone believed in her unconditionally. The pain of the past weeks, months, and years began to feel smaller, distant, like shadows that no longer held power over her. In the evenings, they would sit together in the garden, watching the sunset and talking quietly. Mr. Harrison would share stories from his own life, tales of challenges he had faced, and how he overcame them. Emily listened intently, learning not only about resilience but also about hope and the importance of kindness. As weeks turned into months, Emily's confidence grew. She made friends at school, joined a small art club, and even began to help other children who seemed shy or overlooked. The fear that had once paralyzed her was replaced with a quiet determination. She wanted to help others as Mr. Harrison had helped her, to ensure that no one else would feel as small or invisible as she had. One evening, as the house settled into a peaceful calm, Emily found herself walking through the rooms she had once dreaded. She paused in front of her old bedroom, the place where she had often hidden and cried. She remembered the nights of hunger and fear, the days filled with endless chores, and the loneliness that had wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. But now, she smiled softly. That room no longer represented despair. It had become a symbol of survival, of courage, and of a new beginning. Mr. Harrison entered quietly, observing her. "You're smiling," he noted. Emily turned to him. "I am," she admitted. "I never thought I could be happy here. But now, I feel safe. I feel like I belong." "You do belong," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "This home, your life, your future, it all belongs to you, Emily. And remember, no one can ever take it from you again." She felt tears of joy well up again, but they were no longer tears of sadness. They were tears of triumph, of relief, and of gratitude. She had been heard, rescued, and cherished. The nightmare that had dominated her life had ended, replaced by a life filled with love, care, and opportunity. As the days continued, Emily flourished. Her drawings became more detailed and imaginative, her schoolwork improved, and her laughter echoed through the house like music. She discovered hobbies she had never imagined, from gardening to storytelling, and she shared her experiences with her new friends, spreading the lessons of courage and kindness she had learned. Mr. Harrison continued to guide her, not as a strict authority figure but as a mentor and protector. He celebrated her achievements, encouraged her dreams, and always reminded her of her worth. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, a bond built on trust, respect, and care. Looking back, Emily could hardly believe how much her life had changed in such a short time. The little girl who once screamed and begged, "I can't stand anymore," had transformed into a confident, joyful child who embraced life with open arms. She had learned that fear and hardship could be overcome, that kindness could exist even in the darkest places, and that one person's courage could change everything. And in the quiet moments, as she sat by the window drawing or reading, Emily often thought of the day Mr. Harrison had come home, the day he had shouted and changed everything. It was a moment she would never forget, a moment when hope returned, when justice was restored, and when she finally realized that she mattered, that her life mattered, and that the world held possibilities far greater than she had ever imagined.